Okay, I'm going to make a start then, brothers and sisters. Welcome to this, our 131st Leeds May Day. I'm Jane Aitchison and I'm the President of Leeds Trades Council. And it's wonderful to see so many of you on Zoom and on Facebook Live and on YouTube. Although I'm sad not to be standing with you in person and able to march together and talk together and chat and hug and do all those, things that we all crave to do, all those human interactions. But as we commemorated nearly 8,000 British workers who have lost their lives in this COVID crisis on Workers' Memorial Day this week, then health and safety has to still continue to be at the forefront of our minds. We're also missing, of course, today the banners and the Crofton Silver Band and all of those other parts of May Day. So we were very grateful that Victoria's Steel Band recorded in their garden some songs for us to start with at the beginning today. The last year has been incredibly difficult, but we have certainly not stood still. Leeds Trades Council has organised workers using Zoom throughout the various lockdowns. And if there is one thing that COVID has taught us, it is that we need our trade unions more than ever. When we saw the fantastic work that Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise have been doing with Sheffield Trades Council and the Bakers Union, we knew that we wanted to do that here in Leeds. But because of COVID, we thought that our focus needed to be broader. Of course, people still need a pay rise, but they also desperately need job security, particularly in the era of fire and rehire. But also they need to be protected from issues of life and death, health and safety. So we've started fundraising at Christmas for Leeds Get Organised. And the support from the Labour and Trade Union movement in Leeds has been nothing short of magnificent. I have to say a huge thanks to all those who've contributed, because in a few short months, we've raised the money that we needed in order to go out and recruit a full-time union organiser here in Leeds. So big thanks to Unite, to the Bakers Union, to Unison, the GMB, the FBU, UCU, the NUJ, the RMT, the NEU and PCS and Labour Party branches all over Leeds. We've raised that 15,000 for the first year of the project, and so we're advertising right now for that trade union organiser. So if you think that it's a job you would like to do, and it'll be a fantastic job to do, or if you know someone who you think their skills would be just perfect for that job, let them know, because that job advert's live right now. And if your branch hasn't contributed yet, don't worry, you haven't missed the boat, because we're now raising the money for year 2 of the project. You know, as trade unionists, we know that the main reason why people haven't joined a trade union is usually because they haven't been asked. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be asking absolutely everyone in Leeds to join a trade union, and also a lot more. We will make a huge difference. We will increase union membership in Leeds, of course, and in turn we will push up pay rates and job security, and crucially, we will improve health and safety here in Leeds. Because Leeds has only got 10%, and not Leeds, sorry, Yorkshire has only got 10% of the population of the UK, but we have had 36% of COVID workplace outbreaks. So there is an awful lot to be done. You know, in the 1860s, when Leeds Trades Council was founded, around 3% of Leeds workers were in a trade union. By the 1880s, Tom Maguire had become the secretary of Leeds Trades Council, and he began organising really hard with the likes of Tom Mann and Will Thorne. And they led and helped to win the builders' strike of 1889 and the incredible Leeds gas strike of 1890. And their new trade unionism had a massive impact on the working lives of Leeds people. So by 1900, when only 3.5% of the population of Britain were in a trade union, in Leeds, it was a whopping 50%. So that's the difference that a really good trade union organiser can make. So no pressure on whoever we're going to take on in the next few months. But of course, it won't be down to them alone, because the whole point of trade unions is that we are all about strength in numbers and about that collective strength. So please get involved with Leeds Trades Council now. You can help to make that difference. And as I always say, together we can win, sisters and brothers. So that's my introduction today. We've got some fantastic speakers for you, and I'm going to kick off with, there's none better than our friend and our sister and the General Secretary, no less now, of the Bakers Union, my very, very dear friend, Sarah Woolley.
Thanks ever so much, Jane, and thank you for the opportunity to join you here today. I know it's not the same. We're not in Leeds in the centre on those historical steps. There's been a few speeches there over the years that I've enjoyed being able to give and in support of the work of the Leeds TUC, but I'm sure there'll be many opportunities to do that again in the future. And isn't it exciting on the day that we're celebrating workers around the world that Leeds TUC is launching Leeds Get Organised, which is going to give thousands of workers in Leeds the opportunity to unionise their workplace, organise their workplace and demand the change that they deserve, that we all deserve. Because as we know all too well, claps on a Thursday night do not pay the bills. You know, the last 12 months has been hard. Key workers like our members in the food industry have put themselves on the front line to keep the nation moving, or in our case, fed. Getting up day after day, working with sometimes hundreds of people, or serving hundreds of people food is not easy under normal circumstances, never mind when we're in the middle of a global pandemic and the worry about safety is magnified. Disappointingly, our members have generally been the forgotten key workers through this. Oh, my modern technology has just jumped me too far down. Disappointingly, our members have been the forgotten key workers through this, the ones in the background. And this may be because we feel that they are seen collectively by the general public as an unskilled workforce. People tend not to realise the importance of food safety and the catastrophic implications if something goes wrong. The fact that our members have to ensure the right ingredients and the amounts of them are correct, that they have to experience the physical toll of moving hot tins at the end of an oven for shifts of up to 12 hours, that they have to know what ingredients are allergens and the impact of those when a customer asks. They have to manage queues and de-escalate issues that occur, and have to deal with abuse and violence from customers because the sausage roll isn't hot enough, or there's a gherkin in the burger they ordered without it. The list goes on, and it certainly isn't something that everybody can do. And I'm proud to have worked in the food industry, to work my way up through Greggs, and now in my role as General Secretary to represent our members on platforms such as this. And everybody in the food industry should be proud to work within it. As I mentioned, our members have worked hard through the pandemic, producing food throughout, ramping up volumes up through the panic buying stages and the reopening of the economy at short notice. Yet in many cases, whilst they've fed the nation, they've struggled to be able to feed themselves and their families. And we've recently done a survey as the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, and I'll put a link to it in the chat when I've done, which has produced some frankly shocking results. Many food workers are struggling to afford the basic foodstuffs they are producing and selling to others. 40% of our respondents told us that they had not eaten enough through the pandemic due to a lack of money. And 1 in 5 said they had lived in a household that had actually run out of food due to a lack of cash. 35% of respondents said they have eaten less to ensure others in their household had enough to eat. And 1 in 5 relied on food from a friend or relative to provide meals. And even more told us they had some real concerns about running out of food, which suggests that food insecurity is a significant issue for workers in the food industry. So alongside supporting initiatives like Leeds Get Organised, which I will repeat and I will keep repeating, is a massive opportunity for trade unions in the city and their members and potential members, not to mention all those workers out there who are being exploited and don't yet know where to turn. We are fully supporting the work of Ian Byrne, the MP, who is calling for a right to food being enshrined into UK law. The statutory right to food would mandate the government to address the key drivers of food poverty to ensure people are able to fully access their right to food. And the scope of this could be revolutionary in tackling hunger and poverty. Long-term benefits could include improved educational attainment, physical and mental well-being, which in turn reduces costs associated with poor health and an increase in crime, as well as meaning businesses have a happier, healthier workforce, which is where our campaign comes in to support. We want to raise the standards of employment in the food industry, remove 0 hours contracts, have a minimum of £15 per hour basic minimum wage, and demand investment into an industry which is huge in the UK, which keeps the nation fed, but has been left behind for far too long when it comes to government investments and opportunities for initiative. We have a real opportunity as restrictions ease and we begin to live life in a new normal. Locally in Leeds, with Leeds Get Organised, and nationally as a union with the Right to Food campaign to make real difference to working people's lives. And I am, for one, I'm extremely proud to be involved. So if you're watching this and work in Leeds, get in touch with Leeds TUC and get Leeds Organised. What a fantastic opportunity you've got. And if you work in the food industry and want to organise your workplace, be that in Leeds or beyond, contact the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union and let's work together to make things get better, because we are the 99%. Thank you.
Fantastic, Sarah. And, you know, now we're going to hear about the reality of that, because we've got Maya from Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise, and she's a fast food worker who's been organised through that campaign. So Maya, we can't wait to hear from you. Please tell us your story.
Hi everyone, my name is Mia and I am a fast food worker in Sheffield and a member of Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise. So I started my job and it was my first ever proper job during the pandemic last year, and I had no idea what to expect. I'd never heard of workers' rights before and I didn't have a clue what a union was, but quickly I started to see problems and feel isolated and powerless. I started coming into work and being made to feel uncomfortable by managers, and I didn't understand what was happening until one day I found out that there was quite a sexist rumour being spread around me, and a male manager who was a lot older than me. I was just trying to be friendly and I was reaching out for help and support at this brand new job, just to be told that I was a flirt and made to feel ashamed. I was shocked and embarrassed and was made to feel like I was in the wrong and that the rumour was my fault. And I know I'm not the only person who has been made to feel like this. It's a part of a wider culture. And young women like me constantly put in a position where we're made to feel on edge. But one day I was so upset and I felt so helpless. But that was the moment that my co-worker and friend said to me, "Don't you know there's something we can do about this? Like, have you ever heard of a union?" And I've never looked back since. We're building a union in our store and going on to other stores to inspire other workers. Building a union from scratch during a global pandemic is not easy, but we've already started achieving great things. We've set each other tasks every week and hold each other accountable. That's democracy. The first issue we decided to tackle in our store was directly related to the sexist culture I mentioned before. The locks on the women's staff changing rooms did not work, so young women would be getting changed and older male managers would walk in on them every day, and this had been going on for years. This is a safety issue and a harassment issue, and ultimately a respect issue. The fact that this billionaire corporation didn't even respect us enough to provide us a private space to get changed. So we came together and applied pressure to the company, and within a few days the locks were fixed. This might sound small, but we are building skills, looking out for each other and building each other up so that we can make ourselves powerful and take on bigger issues and win. And that is why projects like Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise are so important. The reality is most workers like me have never heard of a union, and that means employers can just take advantage of us. So Sheffield Trades Council launched this project and we are proactively going out and finding the future leaders of our movement. Now, me and my co-workers are supporting each other to do things that we never thought we could. We are recruiting more workers to our union every single day, and the community is coming together around us to support us. We are united in our movement of low-wage workers, care workers, fast food workers, shop workers, cleaners. We are all getting treated the same. And when we unite together in a union, there's no stopping us. There is nothing we cannot achieve. And I'm so excited that Leeds Organised is launching today so we can spread our movement to your city too. We've got your backs and you've got ours, and together we will win everything we deserve.
Oh, fantastic, Mia. That was fantastic. You are brilliant. We need more of you in our movement. Absolutely. And we're going to get more, aren't we, through Leeds Get Organised. So great stuff. Thank you so much. So our next speaker today is none other than the Assistant General Secretary of Unite the Union, Howard Beckett. So Howard, it's a great privilege to have you here speaking to Leeds May Day. Thank you.
Jane, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. And how do I follow Maya? Maya, that was inspirational stuff, and it is your generation and stories such as that that give hope to everybody that there is a better tomorrow than there is yesterday. So thank you for your contribution. Thank you for everything you're doing to recruit members, and thank you for your strength. It's incredible, and I felt inspired listening to you. Jane, what a year we are all facing. We know that we have seen over 150,000 deaths in our societies. We know we have a government that has failed to follow anything approaching zero COVID. We know the thousands of workers that we've lost, over 1,000 workers alone lost in the NHS. We know that there have been over 134,000 complaints to the HSE in reference to unsafe workplaces and not one single prosecution. In Unite, twice we have had to take legal action in order to defend the right to picket. Workers who are told that it is safe to be inside a workplace, but not safe to have a socially distanced picket outside that workplace. And twice, once with the Westminster government and once with the Holyrood government, we have had to take action to change the regulations in order to protect the right to picket through this crisis. And that is in stark contrast to the 77,000 individual prosecutions that there have been for breaking COVID regulations. A society where the message is very clear that workers are to be blamed for this crisis and the establishment are to get away with it. And now we hear the stories such as the one that Sarah told, of workers forced into work through this crisis, told that their work is essential. In reality, for Sarah's union, workers who are told that they are feeding the nation when they are not getting enough money to feed their own families. And what the workers now face, they face the reality of deregulation through free ports. They face fire and rehire. They face the prospect of redundancies. They face in-work poverty. And as Sarah referenced, they face food poverty. And this is an attack now on our civil liberties. On this May Day, we should all recognise that workers' civil liberties are now being attacked. They attacked our right to picket through the COVID laws. They have passed the CHIS legislation that has looked to legalise crime, murder, torture and rape, legalised before those crimes are permitted or take place. And they have legalised the infiltration of our movements, infiltration of Black Lives Matters, infiltration of Extinction Rebellion and infiltration of the trade union movement. And when we thought that legislation could not get worse, we were all mistaken, because along comes the police crime and sentencing legislation that seeks to criminalise the lives of those in the Traveller, Romani and Gypsy communities, looks to attack our rights of protest and tell us that we cannot protest if our protests are too noisy or if we have not agreed a start time and a finish time with the police, looks to tell us that we are guilty of a criminal offence just for ought to know of whether or not there is a regulation that we are breaching. And worse, the worst for me, it looks to legalise racism within our society. It seeks to protect the rights of racist slave trader monuments before our rights of protest. If anyone asked a question as to whether or not racism is institutionalized in society, simply look at this piece of legislation, and we should all reference the fact that racism is being used by society right here and now to divide working people. But we can all be inspired by the story of Maya. We can all be inspired by our history. The reality is, in 1946, when people returned from the Second World War, they would have never imagined in 1938 that they could build a social state, build the NHS, build 1 million council houses and send their children to third-tier education. And it is why now all of us need to summon that same strength, summon the strength that Maya is showing, summon the strength for a new generation, and believe that we can create another society, a society where we ban zero-hour contracts, where we have workers' rights from day one, where we understand that we deserve a decent day's pay for a decent day's work, where we protect our civil liberties. The reality now for all of us is that we must get in a union. We must understand the power of a collective and understand the power of trade unions, understand the power of our labour, understand that if we remove our labour, this country cannot operate. We have to fight now for a new generation. We have to fight for decency. We have to fight for our civil liberties. And in the words of Martin Luther King, we have to fight for justice.
Thank you so much, Howard. They were incredibly powerful words. It's really, really good to have you speaking here to us this May Day. Thanks so much. Our next speaker today is one of our own, the president of Leeds UCU, the university, but also the national president of UCU. So great welcome to one and only lovely Vicky Blake. Here you go, Vicky.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And again, like everyone else, I wish we were together in person, but we're not, but we're here together online. And I have dressed for the occasion with my Build the Union t-shirt and my picketing hat, because organising is so essential. It is so essential to our movement and to workers everywhere. And organising precarious workers everywhere is vital to social and economic justice for everyone. It's also vital to justice for our climate, because it needs to be fundamentally part of that push for a just transition to a greener economy as well, so that we can all keep living on this planet without frying and while affording to be able to eat and put a roof over our heads. And I think the speeches that we've heard so far have really brought home how bad the situation is here in the UK and just how much work we have to do. But we won't be daunted, and it's so brilliant to be here celebrating organising efforts that are going to keep that fight up and keep things going. We are strongest, we know, when we come together. And trade unions have proven time and time again that this is the case, but we can't afford to forget it. Despite what some would have you believe, and despite what some do their best to portray us as in the press, when they are, for example, vilifying teachers for asking for basic safety measures that would prevent us from intensifying a global pandemic and killing more people than necessary, and who've already, you know, in the wake of numbers that are unacceptable who have died. You have teachers being vilified for protecting safety. You have workers who are speaking out being vilified. This is a time for us to remember the importance and the strength of unions, that we are not a threat to society. We are not a threat to any kind of order other than the kind of control and fear that those who are in elite positions who rely on our work, on our labour, would have us believe to maintain their positions of power. Whether everybody realises it or not, every single job is underwritten by the threat of precarity. And that is all too often repackaged and shoved down our throats as flexibility, when what they mean is flexploitation. As Jane said, I'm president at the moment of the University and College Union, and it's interesting that a lot of people don't realise just how casualised and how precarious so many workers are in our universities, colleges, and in our prison education systems and adult and community education. It is absolutely rife, and people are living hand to mouth despite the image that is often presented of us all being, you know, well-paid lecturers or what have you. We have people going between jobs, sofa surfing, sleeping in their cars, having to relocate after each contract is over, no stability whatsoever. And that lack of stability means that it is harder to organise us, but it is not impossible. Last year, we had strikes in UCU over, amongst other issues, casualisation and precarisation of our workforce. And that really energised our union, because putting the most vulnerable and the most precarious workers with the least rights at the centre of our fight as a movement is imperative. absolutely imperative. And any union or any organisation that forgets that risks becoming irrelevant and part of the problem. It is absolutely essential. And it's why what we're seeing in Leeds, I was so excited to see how this project goes forward. I'm determined that we will fundraise for year 2, 3, 4 and ad infinitum, and that this idea will spread. It's been in Sheffield, it's in Leeds, it will go further afield, because we do have strength when we gather in numbers, and that is what they're afraid of. And that is why our rights to protest and our rights to picket and our rights to speak out are under threat, while statues of dead white men from long ago who profited so much off the backs of those who were more exploited and more vulnerable than them are being protected by the police crime. And I'm so angry about it, I can't even breathe when I start to think about the fact that you could be prosecuted for pulling down a statue of a slaver and you aren't protected adequately about the risks when you go into an unsafe workplace. The people who should be facing prison sentences are those who have put workers at risk, who have led to workers dying on the job, who have put their own families at risk for going into work. It is absolutely disgraceful. And we have to just keep going. I think that we can be made to feel deflated and tired. We can be made to feel like, you know, in the face of these figures, which are horrifying, the litany of failures from this government, that even the most dedicated of us can feel rocked by this. We see that even those who are most affected don't always believe what is going on, or they feel unable to believe it. The only way through this is to see where they're attacking us. They're attacking us in our right to speak out. So we know that that's dangerous, and we know that gets to them. And we know actually that what is dangerous to the elite is absolutely essential to those of us who are ordinary workers who need and care about everybody else. So sorry, I'm quite angry and not as coherent as I would like to be today. But I just think if we take away from today one message, it is that we need to find togetherness. We need to find ways to understand when we disagree internally in this movement, and to find ways to build that into making this movement stronger. It is the most important thing we can do, to find ways to stand alongside and support each other. And just want to say solidarity with everybody here today, everybody watching. And if you're not in a union, please join one. Please get organised and reach out, and we'll all be there to help you.
Thanks so much, Vicky. You know, hey, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention, are you? So absolutely justified anger there. And what you've been organising with your members in UCU has been really inspiring, Vicky. And talking about inspiring protests and inspiring strikes, our next speaker today is David Douglas, who's a GMB rep, but also a British Gas striker. And I have to say, one of the limits of Zoom, you know, is we would be giving you a standing ovation right now if we were on those steps, David. So thank you so much for joining us today. Come on, David.
Well, where to begin? So it all started in July, I suppose, after lockdown, inspired us to go out and help as key workers, campaign to be key workers so we could go and help as customers. And we've ended up getting sacked for it. So thanks to British Gas for that. I think this is quite inspiring. I wasn't really prepared for today, but listening to you speaking, I've been sort of mulling it over, and I believe we've enjoyed the benefit of being a well-organised trade union, a profitable business for too long. And it's been a real highlight this year to the trade union movement towards our members at British Gas and the employees of British Gas, to how important it actually is to engage with the TU outside of British Gas and really get organised. We've had a safety blanket over us for years because the share price has been great, the pension's been great, and slowly but surely it's crept up on us. And with the change of this higher management and the CEO at British Gas, they've hoodwinked us really and pulled the rug from under us. We've had great support though, I must say. We've done 43 days and we're not finished. We've all been sacked and rehired. We've lost a quarter of the skilled workforce because they've just decided that's enough. Some have walked away without jobs. They just can't work for the place anymore. In Leeds itself, I believe we've lost a fifth of the skilled workforce in Leeds. We had an apprentice in Leeds for about 10 years and 10 years before that. So we're really struggling with numbers now. It's interesting you mentioned the Leeds gas strike in 1890. Ian Dalton gave me some reading material around that that he'd done a few years ago, and I was reading it, and we actually campaigned for double time on Good Friday back in 1890. And it's interesting to know that now in 2021, we don't get double time on Good Friday anymore. They've taken that away as one of our benefits of the fire and rehire. So we've gone back 130 years there on that benefit. So yeah, we're not finished. We will be back. We're already putting plans in place. They don't want to talk to us. They won't even engage with us at the moment. They believe they can run the business without a trade union. They believe they can run it through workplace representatives, and they're singling us out. There's other things in there as well. The finance guys don't seem to get the way the modern world is. They say all the right things. They put the flags up about equality. But interestingly, in the negotiations, we were talking about a more diverse workforce and getting ladies to come and work, become engineers and do that job. And we have a senior steward called Liz Robinson, who's been working for the gas industry now for over 30 years. And whilst they were talking about the equality there, they didn't even invite Liz, as if she didn't really matter to the conversation. They talked about equality without her there, which was quite interesting. So thanks for the opportunity to speak. We will be back. You will see us again with the flags, I'm sure, and we will get our benefits back eventually, I'm sure. And thanks for all your support on the picket lines.
Thanks ever so much, David. I mean, you will always have our support, absolutely. I think there's two things just to say there. Clearly what David's saying, a really skilled worker there, and what Vicky was saying, university lecturers, all incredibly precarious now. This precarious work, it's not the kind of work that you think it is. We are all really facing precarious employment now. So it's really important. This is uniting us all. But also, just harking back to that 1890 gas strike, David, how they won it. The Tories who ran Leeds at the time had shipped in from Manchester 10,000 scabs and were putting them up in Leeds Town Hall. And how they won it was when they woke up the next morning to go and scab on that dispute, there were 40,000 protesters outside to stop them. So it was solidarity across the trade union movement that won the dispute for them. And that's what we need to do. We need to build solidarity across the whole trade union movement, because there are millions of us, and together we are absolutely unstoppable. So let's keep on doing that, sisters and brothers. Now, our trade union movement will look at everything. We'll look at our communities and how it's all impacting. One of the things we've been campaigning on this year is to stop the expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport. So our next speaker is Ian Coatman, and he's from Galba, the group against the expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport. So Ian, you're very welcome to join us here today.
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon, everybody. At a time when we should be drastically reducing carbon emissions, the airport wants to expand by 75%, and that means a 75% increase in carbon emissions. So Galba spent the past 18 months on this, and I'd like to thank Leeds Trades Council for their support throughout the campaign. Now, a characteristic of that campaign has been a repeating cycle where Galba would present evidence to the council detailing the impact of expansion or highlighting major flaws in the application, of which there were many. And then Leeds Bradford Airport or the council planning department would pay a consultancy who would come back and say Galba is wrong. But I've got no doubt at all that without the efforts of Galba, the application would have been approved last summer with a minimum of questioning. But finally, in March this year, the council gave approval. But this is far from over. Currently, the application is with the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, for his determination. But the implications of this go well beyond Leeds, and Galba is pressing the Secretary of State to hold a public inquiry. Now, we can't leave this to Robert Jenrick's better nature. It's important for all of us to lobby him and your MP to press for a public inquiry. Now, the council declared a climate emergency in 2019 and committed to net zero in the city by 2030. But then they approve expansion, which makes net zero impossible to achieve at any point. By 2030, for example, the airport itself would emit more carbon than is allowed for the entire city under that net zero target. Which begs the question, did the council make that declaration without understanding what it meant, or did they never have any intention of honouring it? Targets without action, that's not unique to this case, of course. And globally and nationally, it's true. And this makes no sense unless you recognise the relationship between the fossil fuel industry, the banks that provide investment, and the political parties that receive donations. As environmental campaigners, you quickly realise that to demand action on the climate means that you're questioning not only environmental policies, but the whole political and economic system. And that's a system that relies on robbing the future to fuel the present. Globally, since 1988, 100 companies alone have been responsible for an astonishing 71% of emissions. And the richest 1% of the world's population cause more than twice as much emissions as the poorest 50%. And of course, it's the poorer communities, those who are least responsible for the problem, who are hit first and hit worst. So the climate emergency is and always has been a class issue, and the fight for social justice and the fight for environmental justice are one and the same thing. Leeds Bradford Airport is owned by AMP Capital, a global investment corporation, and they claim that expansion will bring economic growth and jobs. It's a mirage. Airports are being automated, and the few jobs that remain are predominantly low-wage and casual. We need investment, yes, but in sustainable industries which offer huge employment opportunities and won't cost the earth. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for all that you're doing with that campaign. Brilliant campaigning. Thanks a lot. Okay, our next speaker is our friend Kausa Jan, Leeds teacher, NEU rep, and member of Stand Up to Racism. I think we would have to all stand by and applaud the way that the teachers have organised through the COVID crisis. It's been absolutely fantastic. So real pleasure to have you on today, Kausa. Welcome to May Day.
Thank you so much, Jane, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Kausa Jan. I'm an assistant head in a primary school in Leeds, and I've been a teacher for 25 years and also a member of Leeds Stand Up to Racism. And thank you for your wonderful compliments, Jane. You know, as we've seen throughout the pandemic, I mean, the shoddy way, the organisation, etc., of our government, and the way that it has let, you know, so many of us down in the population, you know, that, and they've got blood on their hands, you know, because they couldn't, you know, that saying that, or let the bodies pile up, etc. We've seen that in real terms. But when we're also looking at the issues of race and the disparity within race and what they call the BME communities, we can see that we've had huge issues. We've had where higher death rates, the lack of access to facilities for people from Black, minority, Asian backgrounds. We've had the higher percentage of people that have been, you know, furloughed or have been, you know, lost their jobs through BME communities. But also from an educational perspective, if we just stop and look at the disparities because of financial issues and the digital divide up and down the country. Jane mentioned about the way that teachers have organised, and unions. I'm an active member of the National Educational Union, who have been advocating and supporting schools and communities and pupils and trying to deliver an education with little and no support. I'll speak from a perspective from my observations, and some of which I've observed either at my school or other schools, and friends and colleagues have told me, where we went into lockdown and there was no guidance from the government to say, right, okay, this is how schools need to follow. I fall into the clinically extremely vulnerable category, and there was little. We knew that we had to shield, but what that shielding meant for us as members of the public, but also as teachers. How were we supposed to deliver an education that was fit for purpose? And we quickly realised that we had a huge disparity, that we had parents with 4 or 5 children at home, multi-generational, with some of them living in back-to-back housing or very sort of small accommodation. And there might be one or maybe, one phone or possibly a laptop in one school. Unfortunately, what happened was that, that if you've got 4 or 5 children and schools are trying to deliver online teaching, children were at disadvantage, so they weren't accessing, not because their parents didn't care, but because they either financially couldn't afford to get laptops or electrical equipment, so they were missing out on education. Then we were promised that we would be given laptops for all children. That didn't transpire for until the second lockdown, where we were actually getting the laptops. And lots of schools had to try and contact community members or organisations for donations, which the government should have been providing. So we've had issues there about the disparities. Now, moving on to looking at the disparities within the communities, we've had a range of things, kind of been thrown at us, one of which is the Sewell report. We saw with, the murder of George Floyd, how that has mobilised and has unfortunately reawakened people that were thinking there is no such thing as racism anymore. We saw with Derek Chauvin that, how he had knelt on, George Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes and resulted in his murder. And then that sort of reawakened people all around the world, and where we started to look at issues that were closer to home, because this wasn't just happening in America, on our own doorstep. So when Colston's statue was felled, all of a sudden people were being criminalized, and we had issues going where people were saying, well, hold on, Black Lives Matter. And then we had the politicized, where schools weren't allowed to talk about Black Lives Matter because it was deemed to be an extremist organization, or that there were dubious links. So we had to be careful. What Stand Up to Racism has done has been trying to amplify the voices and to make sure that people understand what the Sewell report is actually saying that there isn't such thing as institutionalized racism, and that the report was biased, that saying that the organizations they looked at, that there wasn't institutionalized racism. We know that's not true. We've got a litany of events such as Stephen Lawrence, the Macpherson report. We're still seeing the disparities within organizations, with people, sort of in different industries encountering racism. We've got a prime minister who's calls Black people pickaninnies, calls Muslim women bank robbers, and it's not pulled up on any of that. So if you look at what Stand Up to Racism has done, we've organised Leeds Stand Up to Racism on the 10th of May. We have got a Zoom, which we're going to be looking at the Sewell report, talking about how the investigation has been flawed and the impact that is having on our communities, and not recognising the racism that we've got in our society. We've also discussing the asylum bill and Kill the Bill, about the right to protest. On the 22nd of May at Millennium Square, we've got Stand Up to Racism. We've got a rally at 5 p.m, a national online rally, and we welcome all of you to come and participate. Also, looking at on the 25th, the first year to mark George Floyd's murder, and take the knee, and there's going to be events held in Potter Newton Park and also hopefully Beeston Park. Absolutely abysmal. Someone's just put this about the lack of recognition that people that came on Windrush, that the way that we've had deportations, people have been criminalised because they didn't have the paperwork that the government and Theresa May and the consequent Conservative government have pushed through, and that, you know, we've seen the treatment of the generation that came from Windrush. Windrush, you know, that for those people that don't understand that people came to actually help rebuild England in the nursing, in building, in foundries, etc. My father came at that time, and, you know, fortunately he had the paperwork, but there've been many people that weren't given the paperwork, and unfortunately, as a result of second, third generation, people have been sent, you know, quote, sent back, you know, and the treatment of the Windrush generation is appalling. We should hang our heads in shame. So my urge to everybody is, firstly, support your schools, support, you know, make sure that you understand what is actually going on, that our schools developing a decolonized curriculum. Please, you know, go and, you know, encourage your parents, your community members to go and ask questions of school. What, you know, what kind of diverse curriculum have you got? Have we got a decolonized curriculum where we are actually looking at the impact of the colonial rule, the lack of recognition of the Windrush generation, the lack of the recognition of the Black and Asian contribution to our society that we have, and, you know, that and the organisation of the National Health Service that we've got. Also, the other thing that I would say is, please, when get out and vote, next week is pivotal. We need to be clearly advocating and saying that we're not going to stand for the government, that their racist ideologies, their racist bias reports, that we need to object. And so please do come and join us in Leeds Stand Up to Racism. You can get our details through Facebook. And remember, united we stand, divided we fall. Thank you for inviting me today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Causa. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
All power to you. Yeah. Okay, now just our penultimate speaker, I just want to say one thing before we bring him in, and that is that what Leeds Trades Council is all about is about uniting the labour and trade union movement, but for a reason, for action, to get things done, to make a difference to people. And I think about 4 years ago at May Day, we had a brilliant speaker from the parents group of Deal, who were the parents of disabled children who'd had their transport cut. And it was brilliant to hear what they were doing. Their campaign was really good, but they were not getting enough political traction. And so at the end of them speaking, I got one of the speakers to go and talk to Councillor Kevin Ritchie, because I knew that he would help them to get things done, and he certainly did. So that's the kind of thing that we can do in bringing people together. And so it's a great privilege to have our fantastic friend, Councillor Kevin Ritchie, speaking to us today. You're very welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Jane. And that was a real important campaign led by women, the mothers of those children. And I'm glad that as a listening council, we delivered for them. And the speakers today have been so inspiring. Maya at the start of her trade union journey, through to our comrades who are on the front line, Dave and his colleagues, and the people at the top there of our trade union movement, leading from the front, the general secretaries and secretaries. And I wanted to start by offering my solidarity to Dave and the British gas workers who were victims of the appalling fire and rehire policy, making the campaign to ban the practice so vital, which I'm pleased that Richard Bergen's certainly leading on. My dad worked for the gas board up until privatisation, and I fondly recall the family Christmas parties down at the new Wortley depot, which back then, to be honest, I thought were thanks to Santa Claus. But I now know it was a union initiative when trade unions ensured firms were embedded in their communities, supporting the whole family unit, as well as delivering on wages and conditions for the workers. And this is all long before the PR gurus started talking about corporate social responsibility. And of course, British Gas, ironically, have fully signed up to that. I've had the privilege of being a Labour councillor since 2014 in the area where I live, which is Bramley in West Leeds, which for those of you who don't know has been christened the Big Apple by Leeds Rhinos legend and Bramley resident Jamie Jones Buchanan. During that time, the biggest challenge I've faced is getting people housed in council housing, and it's not getting any easier. We have to sell 500 to 600 council houses every year under Right to Buy. Despite our own council house building programme, which is one of the most ambitious in the country and aims to build another 1,500 quality, energy efficient homes over the next 5 years, that will still leave us with a net loss of well over 1,000 in that period. Right to Buy has to go, comrades. We've also lost £2 billion cumulative income in government grants since 2010, as we've borne the brunt of Tory Lib Dem and then more Tory imposed austerity. But our Labour Council has made a difference in that time. We've worked with the trade unions to avoid compulsory redundancies, developing an early leavers initiative for our staff to leave on a voluntary basis. We're a real living wage employer, now paying a minimum of £9.50 an hour, including to our apprentices, and uprating annually in line with the Living Wage Foundation obligation. We're committed to insourcing jobs. This year, we've brought another third of the housing repairs contracts in-house, and we received national coverage for the way our in-house school meal service delivered thousands of quality lunches to our children during lockdown, compared with a pathetic offering from the profit-driven private providers. So on Thursday, it's vital people get out and vote to keep Leeds Labour and get Tracy Brabin elected as our first West Yorkshire Mayor. Don't put what we've achieved at risk in Leeds. Every council budget, the Tories and other parties vote to cut trade union facility time. That's a precursor to reduce consultation and slash the terms and conditions of our staff. Remember, they have form. Never forget the 11-week bin strike in 2009, when the dreadful Tory-led coalition that ran this city tried to slash the workers' wages. Don't let those days return, comrades. And let's hope next year our May Day celebration is back where it belongs, outside our fabulous council-run city library and art gallery. And good luck to Howard in the Unite General Secretary election as well. You've certainly got my vote as a Unite member. And I'll finish by urging you once more to get out and support your local Labour candidates' campaigns. And please vote Labour by post or on May the 6th at the polling station. Thank you, and solidarity to all.
Thanks ever so much, Kevin. It's always great to hear from you. And our final speaker, last but absolutely not least, one of our favourite MPs. We better not show too much favouritism, but I have to say, whenever Leeds workers are in struggle, Richard is there. Whenever we're in any kind of trouble, Richard is speaking up for us in Parliament. So it's an enormous privilege to have our friend and Labour MP, Richard Bergen, to close the rally today. Richard.
Thanks very much, Jane. It's been a real pleasure to hear all of the speakers today, and thank you for this invitation to speak at the May Day rally. I look forward to speaking at it, hopefully in person next year. International Workers' Day, of course, is a day of celebration of working class movements and of our struggles, of our victories, of the gains that our movement has made, from the 8-hour day to the right to vote, to the abolition of slavery, to the welfare state and the creation of our National Health Service, because the cause of Labour is the hope of the world. It's a reminder of the giants on whose shoulders we stand. And it's a day when we don't just remember, it's a day when we recommit to continuing that struggle every single day. And International Workers' Day is a reminder that ours is a global struggle. The last year of pain and suffering has affected our communities all over the world underlines just why our struggle and our movement must be an internationalist one. A year ago, as the COVID crisis hit, we heard all sorts of rhetoric about how this crisis would bring us closer together, how this crisis would be a catalyst for positive change. 1 year on, we can see that that was a lie. 1 year on, we have had over 100,000 people unnecessarily lose their lives from COVID in our country alone because of this government's policies. We've seen the corporate takeover of the state. with a growing stench of corruption as billions in COVID contracts are handed to those with friends in high places. We've seen this crisis used as cover for further privatisation and outsourcing, with track and trace handed over to Serco and the like. We've seen the crisis used to drive down wages and conditions through fire and rehire. We've seen attempts to pit public sector workers against private sector workers to force down all pay in a race to the bottom. We've seen school children left without enough to eat, people denied decent sick pay, many on furlough paid less than the minimum wage, and disabled people given insulting 37 pence benefits increases. And this crisis has shone a spotlight on the deep failings of 40 years dominated by neoliberalism, marketisation, deregulation, and privatisation. So this must be the moment. This must be the moment when we ditch all of that and build a better society. People agree with us. They want change. The polls show people want a more inclusive, fairer, more equal society to be built out of this crisis. But to win a progressive alternative, we have to build the movements and we have to fight for it. Our movement makes gains only through struggle. The ruling class never gives anything away without a struggle. If we are really going to learn the lessons from this crisis, then we have to fight for a society that serves the many, not the few. So let's fight for a 15% pay rise demanded by NHS staff. Let's fight for a proper pay rise for all public sector workers and for a real living wage of at least £10 an hour for all workers. Let's fight for an end to fire and rehire and to 0 hours contracts. Let's fight for a Green New Deal with millions of good unionised skilled jobs at its core. Let's fight for 1 million council houses. Let's fight for a social security system that ensures a dignified minimum income guarantee. Let's fight for a right to food. Let's fight for an end to all National Health Service privatisation and for a national care service. Let's fight for a shift in wealth, power and control so that every single human being is treated with dignity. In fact, let's fight for the popular manifestos Labour stood on in 2017 and 2019 that have proven to be needed now more than ever. And let's demand a windfall tax on the companies that have made super profits during this crisis and a wealth tax on the super wealthy too, not only to pay for this, but to build a more equal society. And if a centrist president of the United States can announce the end of trickle-down economics, if Joe Biden can announce massive investment in green energy, in modern transport, in high-speed broadband, in health and social care, in social security, if he can announce taxes on the super rich to fund this, well, then that's the very, very least that the Labour Party needs to be fighting for. Now, as I said at the beginning of my remarks, our struggle is an international one. The capitalist class acts globally, and we need to be linking up our struggles across the globe. We'll only beat the union busters like Amazon if we organise together. We'll only stop the tax dodgers if we work together. And we will only prevent the worst effects of climate change if we fight this together so that the world meets its commitments needed to keep global temperature rises below 1.5 degrees. And that means the developed world must do its proper share so the world can halve emissions by 2030. And it must deliver on the $100 billion per year commitment to help developing nations cut their emissions and cope with the impacts of climate change. Now, from its inception, a key message of May Day has been about the struggle for peace and the struggle against war. And as well as the global climate threat, I'm very worried by the military plans of our government. Boris Johnson's new integrated review of defence is a dangerous new global vision. Tens of billions more spent on the military at the same time as cuts to public services are planned. When we should be supporting multilateralism and cooperation, it risks dragging us into siding with the US in what appears to be a new Cold War with China. And Boris Johnson boasts he's going to expand the number of nuclear warheads by 40%, ripping up decades of gradual disarmament. Each nuclear warhead is about 8 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, which killed over 140,000 civilians. If we're to spend billions more increasing the number of nuclear weapons, then what's to stop others also doing the same in a new global arms race? And there's lots more on international justice that I would like to talk about, from the US ending its inhumane blockade of Cuba, to justice for Palestine, the global Black Lives Matter movement, which has rightly shone a spotlight on institutional racism and the need to end the war on Yemen. But there is one global issue I especially want to draw attention to at the moment, and that is vaccine apartheid. 83% of all vaccines so far have gone to richer countries. As it stands, it will be years before the rest of the world is fully vaccinated. Are we going to stand back and allow what's underway in India and in Brazil to continue? We can't allow tens of millions of lives to be put at risk. Most countries don't have enough vaccines simply because the technology is being controlled by a handful of private companies. It's in private hands, even though the vaccines only exist because of massive public investment. To save lives, we must allow the poorer countries to produce their own supplies of the vaccines. And that means backing the call from over 100 countries to temporarily waive the vaccine patents and share the technology. Yet Boris Johnson's government is working hard to stop this demand in the international forums. It's a disgrace and it's costing lives. So let's resolve today, on May Day, as always, to redouble our efforts to build the biggest global movement possible for a better world. That means the biggest global movement possible for a people's vaccine, as part of achieving a world that puts lives before private profit. That is what May Day is all about.
That's brilliant, Richard. Thank you for that really important internationalist message as well. What an absolutely great way to finish our May Day rally today. I have to say, you know, Richard said there, the cause of Labour is the hope for the world. And if you want to be part of that hope, then please get involved with your trade union and please get involved with Leeds Trades Council. The next year or two with this Leeds Get Organised project is going to be very exciting. And if you didn't think it was going to be before, I'm sure when you heard Mia speak that you knew that we are going to have a really, really interesting time talking to all of the precarious and unorganised and young workers in Leeds who desperately need a trade union. So please get involved, get in touch with us, and thank you so much for your participation in May Day today. Thanks, as I always say, go off and be thinking about how together we can win. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Have a great bank holiday. Remember to thank the unions for that as well. Yes. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Well done, Jane. Fantastic.
Oh, thanks so much, Howard. Thanks for coming. I know you've got a very busy day.
Thank you. Take care.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Jane, for bringing us all together.
Oh, thanks, Vicky. It was great to hear from you, pet.
Take
and
care.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for joining us, Dave. Thank you so much, Sarah. And
no
thank
worries.
you for bringing Mia to us. She was absolutely brilliant. Please let her know that we thought she was brilliant, yeah?
Will do. Thank you. See you later.
See you later.